A few weeks ago, I made a video talking about champions who were done dirty in Legends of Runeterra. Characters that I feel were in some way, shape, or form done a disservice in how the card game chose to portray them. While LoR has, for the most part, done a lot of genuine good for League's broader lore and mythos, there are some champions who unfortunately got the short end of the stick in terms of their narrative. Last time I wound up focusing pretty much exclusively on antagonists, so let's take a look at the more heroic characters this time around. To start, let's have Jax lead us off. Jax is an interesting character all around, beginning as something of a joke before suddenly becoming a very serious character following the Great Retcon. In his current lore, Jax is believed to be the last survivor of Acacia, a nation that destroyed itself in a foolish effort to wield the power of the Void against the Shuriman Empire. He's actually not, but no one knows about Zillion and his refugees since they're stuck outside of time. Anyways, Jax bore witness to his homeland being torn asunder by eldritch horrors beyond human comprehension. Everyone and everything he ever knew and loved was consumed by forces older than the cosmos itself, and Jax himself had effectively lost his reason to live. He was prepared to end his own life before the horrors could claim him, when suddenly a miracle happened. Jax found a lone Acathian brazier staff, basically a magical torch, burning amidst the sea of chaos. This lone flame somehow managed to not only stay lit, but actively warded off the encroaching madness for some reason. The hows and whys are open for interpretation and debate, but it ultimately doesn't matter that much. The point is, this was a literal light in the darkness for Jax. Against all odds, this tiny flame from his homeland withstood and even repelled the all-consuming insanity that is the Void. Jax wasted no time snatching it up and taking it with him, dubbing it the last light of Acacia. For thousands of years, Jax has carried the torch to preserve not just the memory of his homeland, but the hope that even something as seemingly indomitable as the Void can be overcome. He's been relentlessly seeking warriors across the ages who might someday be able to help him fight back against the Void when the time comes. And in LoR, we see the crew that Jax has assembled in the modern age to do so. This fighting force consists of an old mechanic, a soldier-turned-chef, an aloof herder, a fishing champion, and some masked kid with a ghost amulet. Okay then. Look, I get the point of the Weapon Masters. They're supposed to be a group of people skilled at fighting with improvised or unconventional weapons. It's a reference to Jax's old lore in which he was able to earn a spot in the League of Legends by facing other champions with a bunch of random bullshit the summoners gave him, because he's just that good. I can see why people who can hold their own using nothing but random junk might be seen as fierce combatants. Even so, Jax is supposed to be assembling a team to fight the Void. You know, the all-consuming Lovecraftian terror that predates time itself. The thing that drives most people insane just by proximity. The thing that even an army of ascended god warriors barely managed to contain, and did so at the risk of acquiring severe PTSD. Like, seriously, what is your plan here, Jax? You're going to drive back the nightmare that consumed your home with frying pans and fishing poles? You've had literally over a millennium to seek out allies or find magics or weapons effective at pushing back the Void. And this is the best you've come up with? This is just Rise of the Sentinels all over again. A group of miscellaneous misfits and weirdos being tasked with driving back the apocalypse. But at least in Rots, for as much of a mess as that storyline was, it gave its protagonist characters relic stone equipment to beat back the Black Mist. If nothing else, Jax's weapon masters should be armed with stuff made from, like, I don't know, celestial metal? Or imbued with magic similar to his fire staff? I'm not saying they need to all be super serious or hyper competent badasses, but as things stand, I seriously don't see Jax's crew lasting very long against the Void invasion. Belveth would wreck them. But let's move on from a potential tragedy to a definite one. Master Yi is the lone survivor of his village. He's a practitioner of Wuju, a form of Ionian martial art that seemingly lets you do all kinds of random nonsense, honestly. The exact powers and limits of the Wuju style are kind of ill-defined beyond just vague Asian-inspired mysticism, but any technique that lets you move at the speed of sound, summon clones, or even heal yourself just by focusing really hard is not to be taken lightly. Indeed, Wuju is considered to be so powerful that the entire village kept it as a close-guarded secret for generations, lest it fall into the wrong hands or draw unwanted attention. When Noxus came to Ionia and started messing things up, Yi went against his elder's advice and took to the battlefield using Wuju style. The simple fact that this lone warrior was able to decimate Noxian troops and even gain a following with powers unlike they'd ever seen before was a problem. So when Noxus found out about an entire village that could use this Wuju power, they bombed the hell out of it to remove a potential roadblock. Yi was understandably kind of depressed for a while, until he eventually met a monkey Vastaya by the name of Kong and found a potentially worthy student who could carry on the legacy and memory of Wuju. Following this, Yi would eventually rebuild the monastery where Wuju was taught and even take on other students, becoming a true master who can pass on the wisdom he gained from his own masters, the war, and even his first disciple. It's a fairly hopeful story that feels like a natural continuation of Yi's lore. Really sucks that all of these new students get massacred by shadow assassins. Yeah, apparently Yi's temple is holding a darkened weapon, and Cain, for whatever reason, decides that one of those parasites isn't enough. He leads a group to break into Yi's temple, and while the outcome varies a little depending on whether or not Ross can possess Cain, the outcome is ultimately the same. Most of Yi's students end up dead. In one version, we see Ross standing atop a pile of their corpses while holding Zelani's blood letters. And in the other, Yi's top student, Jun, takes the blood letters in a desperate attempt to fight back after seeing her friends being slaughtered. I just feel like this is such a dick move. Like, Yi's whole story is about healing and self-reflection, rebuilding the legacy of a people that were all but completely wiped out in the war. Legends of Runeterra put him in a hopeful position and then just immediately tore that all down. We don't even know if Yi himself survived the attack on the temple. In one timeline, he's shown fighting Shadow Cain while Zelani breaks free, and in another, he's presumably going to have to fight Rost, who has the powers of both Cain and Zelani at his disposal. Master Yi definitely got screwed over here, and the fact that he's ultimately kind of a footnote in the broader Darken saga doesn't help. Speaking of which, well, okay, the next character we're discussing doesn't exactly have direct ties to the Darken Saga, but it feels like she should. Morgana's direction in LoR has always seemed kind of weird to me. Like, it feels incomplete, or like they weren't entirely certain what direction to take her. Morgana's level 1 art has her tending to Neela after the latter's near-death encounter with Volibear, but then her level 2 has her whipping a Mage Seeker out of nowhere. Most level ups in this game show some sort of progression. It can be a champion going from a static pose to an action pose, from one form to another, or even from one scene to the next. In Morgana's case, though, well, her broader storyline seems to revolve around protecting mages from the Mage Seekers, which makes her level 1 art feel a little bit disjointed. Like, I guess it could work if the Mage Seekers were hunting Neela, but nothing in the card's art or text implies that that's the case. Confusing matters even more is the fact that Morgana seems to have a cult on Targon now, somehow, even despite the fact that she's been secluded in Demacia for centuries. The Mage Seekers do seem to be exiling mages to the mountain now, though I really couldn't tell you why. It kind of feels like an excuse to justify Morgana being a Demacia Targon dual region champion, even though I feel her being part aspect is more than enough of a justification in that regard. I mean, they didn't need to give Kael a story about going to Demacia to justify that. On that note, honestly speaking, I do think it kind of sucks that the sisters were separated for LOR. Look, I do get why. I understand wanting to have them involved in desperate storylines rather than having them joined at the hip for each and every appearance. But, like, honestly, it's kind of wild to me that they decided Rise was going to be Kael's last resort in her darkest hour. When the Darken are destroying everything and Zelani has turned herself into a crazy blood dragon by eating the Judicator's mom, she decides not to call on her own sister for help, but a guy was never established she had any connection to. And sure, as last resorts go, nuking the Darken with a world rune isn't awful. Honestly, I do love the character development they gave Rise in the card game. His whole crisis of faith, wondering if the world is even worth saving at this point. Rise's whole thing of looking back through the many tragedies of Runeterra and realizing that humanity, for all its faults and screw-ups, might be worth saving if it's managed to endure and rebuild after a half dozen near apocalypses it's faced already. That is rad, but I also don't think it needed to be tied to the Darken storyline specifically. Plus, thinking on it, wouldn't Morgana be a more thematically appropriate trump card against Zelani anyway? Like, the Bloodweaver ate her mom too. Plus, Morgana's whole deal is making people feel the pain and agony they inflict on others. Zelani wants to end all pain and suffering on Runeterra, but has caused so much of it in the pursuit of her goal. Imagine the anguish she'd feel wrapped in Morgana's chains. Every person she's absorbed or stripped of free will would come back to bite her. That just feels like a way more fitting conclusion than blasting her with the potential Deus Ex Machina that is a world rune. I don't know, I just compare what we got with Morgana to what could have been, and I feel like there's a lot of wasted potential there. But what do you all think? Do you agree with my takes? Do you think these champion storylines could have been handled differently? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and until next time, stay bright.